If you've ever owned a cat, you've probably seen it. Your cat stops moving. Its ears twitch. Its pupils widen. And then, it just stares. At a wall. At a ceiling corner. At something you can't see. Most of us laugh it off. We say, "Oh, cats are weird." Or we blame it on insects, dust, shadows. But what if that's not true? What if cats aren't staring at nothing, but at something left behind? Tonight, I'm going to tell you a true story from 2021 in a small town called Black Hollow, Vermont. It's about a house. It's about a wall. And it's about a cat who became a non-human witness to something that should have stayed buried. And before this story ends, you may never look at your pet the same way again. In October 2021, I moved into a rented farmhouse on the outskirts of Black Hollow, Vermont. The place was old but beautiful. Built in 1893, according to the paperwork. Wide wooden floors, tall ceilings, a stone basement that smelled permanently of cold earth. It was quiet, too quiet, but I didn't mind that. I worked remotely as an illustrator, and silence helped me focus. The only other living being in the house was my black Maine Coon cat, Vaelorin. Vaelorin wasn't ordinary. He was huge, nearly 18 pounds, with thick fur and eyes so pale green they almost looked silver. He wasn't playful. He wasn't loud. He observed. And 3 days after we moved in, he started staring at the north wall of my bedroom. Not randomly. Not occasionally. Every night. Exactly at 2:17 a.m. The first time it happened, I woke up because I felt watched. Vaelorin was sitting upright at the foot of my bed, completely still. His head tilted slightly upward toward the upper corner of the wall near the ceiling. There was nothing there. No vent. No picture frame. No light source. Just blank, pale gray paint. I whispered his name. Vaelorin. He didn't respond. Not even a twitch. Then his ears flattened slowly against his head. And I heard something. A faint sound. Like fingernails brushing across wood from inside the wall. I froze. It lasted only 3 seconds. Then silence. Vaelorin relaxed. Jumped down. Walked out of the room as if nothing had happened. I told myself it was old pipes. Wood contracting in the cold. This house was nearly 130 years old, after all. But the next night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., it happened again. This time, I stayed awake on purpose. I watched him walk into the bedroom at 2:15. He jumped onto the bed, sat down, and turned his head toward that same corner. His pupils expanded so wide that his eyes looked black. And this time, he followed something. His gaze moved slowly from the top corner, down the wall, stopping halfway, as if something unseen was crawling vertically downward. But there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. My skin felt cold. And then Vaelorin did something he had never done before. He growled. Not a hiss. Not a warning meow. A deep, vibrating growl from his chest, like he was seeing another animal. The scratching sound returned. Louder this time. Dragging. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from inside the wall. I jumped out of bed and switched on the light. The sound stopped instantly. Vaelorin kept staring. And that's when I noticed something that hadn't been there before. 3 thin vertical lines in the paint. High on the wall. Almost touching the ceiling. They looked like scratches. But they were too straight. Too evenly spaced. And too high for any human to reach without a ladder. I hadn't noticed them when I moved in. But now they were there. Fresh. And Vaelorin hadn't moved his eyes away from them for a single second. That was the moment I realized something was very wrong. Because my cat wasn't staring at nothing. He was tracking something. Something that seemed to move. Something that left marks. Something inside the wall. And that was only the beginning. The third night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat upright in bed with my phone in my hand, recording the corner of the wall where Vaelorin kept staring. I told myself I would prove it was nothing. Old house noises. Thermal expansion. Maybe even a mouse. At exactly 2:16 a.m., Vaelorin walked in. He didn't look at me. He didn't hesitate. He jumped onto the dresser this time instead of the bed. Higher. Closer to the wall. At 2:17 a.m., he fixed his eyes on the same upper corner. But something had changed. His body wasn't tense in fear. It was alert. Focused. Tracking. His head tilted slowly downward, then slightly to the left, as if whatever he saw wasn't confined to one spot anymore. My throat went dry, because this time, I heard movement inside the wall before the scratching began. Not random creaks. Not settling wood. It sounded like pressure shifting behind the drywall. Like something sliding along the inner beams. Then came the scratching. Longer this time. Not just 3 seconds. At least 10. Dragged from high above. Slowly downward. And Vaelorin followed it with perfect synchronization. When the sound stopped halfway down the wall, so did his gaze. I felt something in the room change. The air felt heavier. Thicker. Like before a thunderstorm. And then Vaelorin did something that terrified me. He stood on his hind legs. He placed both front paws flat against the wall, exactly where his eyes had stopped. He pressed them there, firmly, as if something on the other side was pressing back. I couldn't breathe. My phone slipped slightly in my hand, and that's when 3 new marks appeared on the wall, right between his paws. Thin. Vertical. Indented into the paint. I saw them form. There was no hand. No tool. No visible force. Just the slow emergence of 3 shallow scratches pushing outward from inside. I screamed and dropped the phone. The scratching sound exploded violently from within the wall. Rapid, chaotic, aggressive. Vaelorin leaped backward, fur-puffed, back-arched. But he didn't run. He stared, locked onto something. Something now directly behind the drywall. And then, 3 heavy thuds. From inside the wall. 1, 2, 3. Each one aligned exactly with the new scratch marks. Then silence. Complete silence. Vaelorin slowly lowered himself, but he did not relax. He kept staring at the same spot for almost 5 full minutes. As if waiting. As if listening. The next morning, I checked the wall in daylight. 6 scratches now. 2 sets of 3. Perfectly straight. Evenly spaced. Too uniform to be random. And the strangest detail, they weren't surface scratches. The paint wasn't flaked outward. It was pressed inward, as if something sharp had pushed from the other side, testing the thickness. That afternoon, I spoke to my nearest neighbor, an older man named Corwin Hale. He had lived in Black Hollow his entire life. When I described the scratching and the exact time, 2:17 a.m., his expression changed. Not surprise. Recognition. He asked me one question. North wall of the upstairs bedroom? My stomach tightened. I nodded. He stayed silent for a moment before speaking again. That room used to belong to the previous owner's daughter. I felt a cold prickle across my shoulders. What happened to her? I asked. Corwin didn't answer directly. He looked toward my house across the road. Then he said quietly, "Animals always reacted before people did." I felt my heart begin to pound. "What do you mean?" He exhaled slowly. In 1996, their cat started clawing at that same wall. Every night. Same time. 2:17 a.m., the air felt thin. And then, I whispered. Corwin's voice dropped lower. They thought the cat was sick, acting strange. But then the scratching marks appeared. Inside the daughter's bedroom. My hands felt numb. And 3 weeks later, he continued, she disappeared. My entire body went cold. No signs of forced entry. No broken windows. Nothing missing. Just gone. I swallowed hard. And the wall? I asked. Corwin stared directly at me. They tore it down during the investigation. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. What did they find? He hesitated, then said something I will never forget. They didn't find a body. He paused, but they found scratch marks on the inside of the beams. From something trying to get out. The world felt unreal. My voice trembled. Something. He nodded once. Too high to be hers. That night, I didn't go to bed. But at 2:17 a.m., even from downstairs, I heard it. Scratching. And Vaelorin wasn't in the bedroom anymore. He was sitting at the bottom of the staircase, staring upward, at the ceiling above him, tracking something that was no longer inside the wall, but moving, above us. After what Corwin told me, I stopped telling myself it was just an old house. Something had happened here before, and whatever had left those inward scratches had not left the house. That night, I kept every light on downstairs. Vaelorin refused to go back into the bedroom. He stayed planted at the foot of the staircase, staring at the ceiling above him. Not blinking, not moving, just tracking. At 2:14 a.m., his tail began to twitch. At 2:16 a.m., his ears flattened. At exactly 2:17 a.m., I heard it. But this time it wasn't scratching. It was a shift. A dragging sound moving slowly across the ceiling beams directly above the staircase. From the north wall of my bedroom, toward the center of the house. Vaelorin's head followed it precisely. Left to right. Step by step. Like he could see it walking overhead. The sound wasn't random. It was heavy. Measured. 3 slow drags. Pause. 3 slow drags. Pause. Always in patterns of 3. My pulse hammered in my ears. The sound stopped directly above me. Right in the center of the ceiling. Vaelorin crouched low. Then something happened that made my blood turn cold. A faint indentation formed in the ceiling paint. Not cracking. Not breaking. Just pressing downward from above. Like a palm slowly applying pressure from the attic side. Except there was no attic. Just sealed beams and insulation. The indentation grew deeper for 3 full seconds. Then released. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. And then I heard something else. Breathing. Slow. Controlled. Not coming from me. Not from Vaelorin. Above us. Vaelorin let out a sharp, guttural hiss I had never heard before. And then he did something new. He didn't stare at the ceiling anymore. He turned his head toward me. But he wasn't looking at me. He was looking just behind me. Over my shoulder. At the staircase landing. My heart nearly stopped. I forced myself to turn around slowly. There was nothing there. Just darkness on the second-floor hallway. But Vaelorin's eyes tracked downward, as if something had begun descending the stairs. Step by step. Silent. Invisible. But heavy. I heard a faint creak. Then another. Each one aligned with Vaelorin's eye movement. I backed away slowly. The air grew colder. Not just a breeze. A sudden drop. Like opening a freezer door. Vaelorin didn't retreat. He stood his ground. Fur raised. Growling low. Whatever it was reached the bottom of the staircase, because the final creak sounded directly in front of us. And then, the front door handle rattled violently. Once, twice, 3 times. I gasped. It wasn't wind. There was no storm. And the door wasn't loose. The handle turned slightly, but stopped, as if something outside was testing it. Trying. Vaelorin sprinted toward the door and slammed his body against it. Claws extended, hissing with full aggression. The rattling stopped instantly. Silence returned. But the air didn't feel empty. It felt crowded. I slowly stepped toward the door, my hands trembling. I looked through the peephole. There was nothing outside, just the empty gravel path. But when I opened the door, 3 fresh scratch marks were carved into the wood. Not on the outside, on the inside, at eye level, pressed inward, like something had been inside the house, trying to get out. I slammed the door shut and locked it. My chest felt tight, my breathing uneven. And that's when Vaelorin did something I will never forget. He walked calmly back toward the staircase, sat down, and looked up again. But this time, he wasn't tracking something moving. He was staring at one fixed point, right at the top of the stairs. And then I heard it. Soft. Close. A whisper. Not from outside. Not from above. From upstairs. 3 faint words. Barely audible. Let me out. My knees nearly gave out beneath me. Vaelorin's pupils widened completely black, and he slowly lifted one paw, pointing toward the bedroom. The north wall. The original spot. Whatever was moving had gone back, and now it wanted something. Not to come in, but to leave. I didn't sleep after that. I couldn't. The whisper replayed in my mind over and over. Let me out. It didn't sound angry. It didn't sound violent. It sounded trapped. That was worse. At 6:30 a.m., as soon as the sun rose, I called Corwin. He arrived within 15 minutes. When I told him what I heard, he didn't look surprised. He just asked one question. Did it follow the cat? I nodded slowly. Yes. He exhaled. Then it's not residual. I didn't understand. He explained quietly. Residual hauntings repeat patterns, like recordings. But this is responsive. It's aware. My stomach tightened. He agreed to help me open the north wall. Not out of curiosity, but because, in his words, if something is asking to get out, better we know what it is. By noon, we had tools ready. Hammer, crowbar, flashlights. Vaelorin refused to leave the bedroom. He sat directly beneath the original scratch marks near the ceiling, staring upward, watching, waiting. Corwin placed the ladder against the wall. The 6 inward scratches were clearly visible now, and beneath them, 3 new ones, lower, about shoulder height. 9 total. 3 sets of 3. Corwin tapped gently between the marks. The sound wasn't solid. It was hollow. Too hollow. He looked at me. You sure? I swallowed. No. But I nodded anyway. He drove the hammer into the drywall. The sound echoed sharply through the room. The second strike cracked it open. Dust fell. Old insulation smell filled the air. Vaelorin let out a low growl. Not aggressive. Warning. Corwin widened the hole with the crowbar. Chunks of drywall fell away. And then we both froze. There was no insulation. No wooden beam. No inner support. Behind the wall, there was empty space. A narrow cavity about 3 feet wide, like a hidden compartment between structures. But this house blueprint had never mentioned that. Corwin shone his flashlight inside. The beam revealed old wooden boards lining the inner cavity. And something else. Scratches. Hundreds of them. Layered over each other. Deep gouges carved into the wood. Some faded with age. Some fresh. All vertical. All in sets of 3. My knees felt weak. Corwin climbed slightly higher and aimed the light upward. And that's when we saw it. A small object wedged deep in the cavity. Near the top. A child's silver locket. Covered in dust. Corwin carefully reached in and pulled it out. When he opened it, there was a photo inside. A young girl. Brown hair. Serious expression. Behind her, faintly visible, was this very room. "This is her," Corwin whispered. "The daughter. The missing girl from 1996. My heart pounded painfully. "But there's no remains," I said. "No body." Corwin didn't answer. He just kept shining the light upward. And then the beam caught something else. Deeper inside. Farther back. Not wood. Not dust. Something pale. Curved. My breathing stopped. Corwin slowly extended the crowbar and shifted debris aside. The pale shape rolled slightly forward. It wasn't a skull. It wasn't bones. It was plaster. An old section of inner wall. Broken inward. Like something had pushed through from another side. And behind that broken panel, there was darkness. Not shadow. Not depth. Just black. Thick. Unnatural. The flashlight beam didn't reach the end of it. It just stopped. Like shining light into smoke. Vaelorin suddenly leapt onto the ladder. He climbed 2 steps and stared directly into that opening. He didn't hiss. He didn't growl. He stared. Calm. Focused. As if he was finally looking at it clearly. And then something moved inside the darkness. Not outward. Not attacking. Just shifting. Like a silhouette adjusting its position. I saw 3 faint lines appear again. But this time, not on wood. On the air itself. Thin distortions. Like claws pressing against invisible glass. And then the whisper returned. Stronger. Closer. Not from behind the wall. From inside that void. Not me. My heart skipped. Corwin stumbled backward. "What did it say?" he asked. But before I could respond, the temperature in the room dropped sharply. Vaelorin's ears twitched. He slowly moved his gaze downward, tracking something stepping out of the darkness. Not fully emerging. Just reaching. And then 3 deep gouges tore downward through the exposed wooden frame. Not slow. Not testing. Violent. The ladder shook. Corwin pulled Vaelorin down just in time. A force burst outward from the cavity. Not wind. Not debris. Pressure. Like the release of something compressed for decades. The light bulb in the bedroom exploded. Glass shattered across the floor. The whisper became a scream. Not human. Not animal. Layered. Distorted. And then, silence. Total silence. The darkness inside the cavity was gone. Now it was just empty space. Plain wooden boards. Dust. And the broken plaster panel. Nothing else. No void. No distortion. Just normal emptiness. Vaelorin slowly relaxed. For the first time since moving into that house, he looked away from the wall. Corwin and I stood there shaking, because whatever had been inside that cavity was not a trapped girl. It was something that had been trying to leave, and we had just opened the door. After the wall was opened, everything felt quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, it feels emptied. Corwin helped me board the cavity back up temporarily. Not to seal it forever, just to cover the damage until I decided what to do next. Neither of us spoke much, because we both understood something. The scratches inside the cavity were not made by a trapped girl trying to escape. They were made by something trying to push through. From somewhere else. That evening, Vaelorin behaved differently. For the first time since we moved in, he didn't go near the north wall. He didn't stare at the ceiling. He didn't sit at the staircase. He followed me, closely, watching me the way he had been watching the wall, as if now I was the one he needed to monitor. That night, 2:17 a.m. came and went. No scratching, no movement, no whispers. I almost felt relief. Almost. Until the next morning. I woke up to find the bedroom door open. I clearly remembered locking it. Vaelorin was not inside the room. He was downstairs, sitting in front of the boarded front door, staring at it. Just staring. My stomach tightened. I walked slowly toward him. That's when I noticed it. 3 deep scratches carved into the inside of the front door. Lower this time, near the bottom panel, as if something had tried to crawl. Oh, not in. Oh. And the scratches were not pressed inward anymore. They were pulled outward, splintered toward the exit. Corwin came over again that afternoon. When I showed him the door, he stayed silent for a long time. Then he said something that made everything finally make sense. In some places, he explained, trauma doesn't disappear. It leaves impressions, like pressure marks in wood. Animals can sense those imprints. But sometimes, they're not just memories. I swallowed. What are they? He looked at Vaelorin. Doorways. The girl in 1996. He had researched her disappearance after we opened the wall. There had been no signs of struggle. No blood. No forced entry. But neighbors reported strange behavior from their pets weeks before she vanished. Dogs barking at empty air. Cats staring at walls. Always around the same time. 2:17 a.m. The official report listed her as missing. Never found. But Corwin found something else in the old town archives. On the night she disappeared, the town recorded a brief, unexplained power outage at exactly 2:17 a.m. 3 minutes long. No storm. No equipment failure. Just darkness. 3 minutes. Long enough for something to open, and something else to close. That night, I made my decision. I couldn't stay in that house. Not because it was haunted, but because I understood something far worse. The scratches were not attempts to escape. They were testing points. Thin places. Vaelorin hadn't been staring at ghosts. He had been watching structural weaknesses in reality. Places where something pressed repeatedly over time. Not hunting. Not attacking. Just waiting for alignment. The inward scratches meant something was trying to push through. The outward scratches on the door meant it finally had. And cats. Cats see disturbances we don't. Minute distortions. Energy shifts. Imprints left behind by previous crossings. They don't stare at nothing. They observe fractures. 3 days after opening the wall, I packed my belongings. The last thing I removed was the board covering the cavity. It was empty. Completely ordinary. But as I turned to leave the room for the final time, Vaelorin stopped at the doorway. He looked once more at the upper corner of the north wall. His ears twitched slightly, but he didn't growl. He didn't arch his back. He simply watched for a few seconds. Then he looked at me and walked out. Whatever had been there was no longer inside. And that is the real reason your cat stares at the wall. Not because they're confused. Not because they're playful. But because sometimes They're the only witnesses to what presses against our world from the other side. This was a true story from 2021 in Black Hollow, Vermont. And if your cat ever stares at one specific place in your house, at the same time, night after night, pay attention. They may not be watching a ghost. They may be watching a door. If this story made you question the quiet corners of your own home, take a moment right now. Look around. Think about the last time your pet stared at something you couldn't see. Have you experienced anything similar? Strange scratching sounds? Unexplained marks? Pets reacting before you notice anything? Share your experience in the comments section below. I read every single one, and your story might be featured in a future video. If you enjoyed this paranormal investigation-style horror story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more dark, realistic, and deeply unsettling stories. And share this with someone who has a cat that stares at the wall, because they might not be alone.